take the privilege of introducing the rest of the members of our panel this morning. This panel is really, it was entitled Setting Your Company for Success from International to Global, but as you'll hear, it's really about strategy. It's about how companies approach the international marketplace and all the strategic elements that go into that. And so we're very fortunate to have a very educated and developed panel with us this morning. And I would encourage all of you to think about any questions that you might have. We're going to go through a round of questions up here, but we certainly will open this up to the audience to have an opportunity to ask your questions. First on the panel, we have Kelly Ortberg to my left, Chairman, President, and CEO of Rockwell Collins, and also on the Executive Committee of Aerospace Industries Association. Kelly has held the two key positions in the company. He's been the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Government Systems, where he led major contract wins, including the avionics business on the KC-46A and the Embraer KC-390, and also the commercial systems part of the business, where he oversaw the launch of Rockwell Collins' highly successful ProLine Fusion integrated avionics system and pursuit and development programs for Airbus 350, XWB, and Boeing 787. Next we have Pat Dewar, who's the Senior Vice President of Lockheed Martin International and Chairman of Lockheed Martin Global Incorporated. He's had nearly, 31 years, as we discussed, with Lockheed Martin, and he served in roles of increasing responsibility, most recently as the Executive Vice President of Lockheed Martin International, where he's responsible for 70 countries around the globe. He has also served as Chairman of Boards of Directors for Lockheed Martin Holdings UK, Lockheed Martin España, Lockheed Martin Australia, and as a member of the Lockheed Martin UAE Advisory Board. Next panelist is Tom Vecchiola, who's President of Raytheon International, the international sales and marketing arm of Raytheon Corporation. Tom is responsible for the company's sales and marketing efforts in more than 80 nations worldwide. And before assuming this role as RII President, he served as Vice President of Business Development and Strategy for Raytheon Integrated Defense Systems, where he was responsible for developing customer-focused strategies, partnering to shape markets, and creating business opportunities for IDS. Finally, we have Thibaut Trancard, Vice President and Country Director for the UAE for Thales. As I learned yesterday, 5 years in the role. And of course, he's the man on the ground here. And so he works with the Emirati authorities and manages the different local structures, entities, and people in the UAE. And he previously served as Sales and Marketing Director of Thales Training Simulation and Country Director for the Thales Group in Libya. So we have a great panel here with a wide variety of experiences, and I hope to tap into that for you. And so I'll start with Kelly. First question is, how have you changed your corporate structure, which is one of the questions we said we would address, to enter and better meet the needs of your customers in your target global markets?
Dave, before I answer that, let me just say thanks for all you do for AIA and your staff. You play a critical role in promoting our industry, and we very much appreciate that.
Thanks.
Yeah, we have had to completely restructure the organization of our company. While our company is about 80 years old, I would say until the last decade, we were very much a U.S. company with U.S. products that opportunistically we'd sell those products into the international market. And we knew if we wanted to be global, we're going to have to change our game, step up a little bit. And we consolidated all of our international entities, which prior to that were distributed within our business units, and created an international organization at the corporate level. So now all of our people in international locations report up through a consolidated organization, and we've seen great progress since we've done that. It allows us to better understand the customers, people on the ground that are living day in, day out with the customers, understanding their needs. It's also allowed us to better develop our people across the organization. And today I expect we're about 43% international, and I expect by 2019 over 50% of our revenues will come from outside the United States. So we're making progress. We've got more to do, but I think creating a corporate focus and a corporate structure is key to pursuing the global market.
And how has that international growth You know, what's your experience over the last 2 decades? I mean, has that been a great leap forward for the company?
Yeah, it has. We've been, particularly the last 5 years, as the U.S. defense budgets have been a challenge, we've been focusing heavily on offsetting some of that growth with international growth. And we've been growing generally between 5 and 10% per year in the international market.
Which is a far cry from what's been happening in the U.S. defense
Yeah,
market.
unfortunately, we've been declining 5% per year as we've gone through that decline. Hopefully, we're through that cycle now.
Well, thanks for that perspective. Pat, it's been 3 years since Lockheed Martin International was announced. And that, again, was you know, sort of a major internal restructuring to try and look at the international business. How has that helped you address international opportunities?
Good. Thanks for the question, Dave, and I appreciate the organizers for putting this together so we can have this sort of dialogue. Yeah, so the story for LM is quite similar to what Kelly has articulated, and maybe some of the unique differences was that, you know, over decades of doing business from the United States, you know, we had done business in, you know, nearly 70 countries, almost all exports, almost all from a production line in the United States. And while, you know, the valued relationship with the customers reaches a particular level, you know, when you're not actually working in the local community and you're not actually hiring local employees of any magnitude, and quite frankly, you're not usually using the local country's financial and contractual norms, you know, there's only so far that relationship can go. So, and you know, we stared at this in earnest before I was at LM International. I ran strategy and business development for the corporation, and it was clear that in order to go from what was about 14 to 50% of sales, kind of in the $6 billion range with Lockheed Martin, in order to really get the game going where we would potentially be able to grow, we needed to become what I call local in as many of the markets where we had opportunity and where the customer wanted us to be. Because you can imagine there are some countries that don't want a Lockheed Martin local presence because they've got either a home team or it's just they're happy with the U.S. export. So essentially, we identified a focused organization beyond a marketing and sales organization. Had its own chief financial officer, because you actually wanted to know how profitable you were in each of these countries you were working. It had its own human relations officer, had its own technical, in our world, engineering and technology officer, so that when you were looking at a country, you were looking at it as if you were a local company. And again, the results, in my view, speak for themselves. We went from about $6 billion to $9.5 billion last year, which you'll see in the annual report, which comes out soon. We went from about 14.5% of sales outside the United States in 2009 to about 21% last year of the Lockheed Martin Corporation. So it was what I call a local strategy, and that's how we did it.
So that is something that you've just developed in the last few years, or is that something that's been coming for quite some time?
Yeah, so we really just developed it, if you will, about 4 or 5 years ago. There's a few exceptions. We had an LM UK, which had about 2,000 employees in 2009. It has 3,000 now. We had an LM Australia, which had, again, about 400 employees, has 1,000 now. So we were able to take the roots of where we had done well and magnify them, and then take that. Not every country is the same, so don't get me wrong, but where we could create an infrastructure, we did.
Okay, thanks. Tom, Raytheon is another company with an extensive worldwide network, and I think we mentioned that you operate in about 80 countries around the world. And so can you give your perspective on sort of the same question? How have you approached it? What restructuring have you done that you thought appropriate, and what has been your approach towards the strategy?
Yeah, I think, Dave, thanks very much for the question, and again, thanks to the organizers and to Mubadala for sponsoring the summit. So similarly, we're structured with an international arm that has an enterprise approach, but also, you know, embedded in the businesses is where we do, you know, most of the majority of the work from an operational perspective, with landed companies in the UK and Australia, as well as several in Europe that are embedded in our business areas. One of the things to note, though, is in 1903, Henry Ford established the Ford Motor Company, where he implemented a vision of becoming global, but he did this through establishing vertically integrated companies. Right? And by 1911, he had operations in Canada and Britain. By the early 1920s, he had 4 other countries, and of course, Ford Motor Company's got operations in over 6 continents. We're not going to solve the global problem by establishing vertically integrated companies internationally. So the approach that we've taken in Raytheon is do the gap analysis and where can we partner for success. So we look at a couple of different aspects of that. How do we penetrate the market? Where do we get greater market reach? Through partnerships. And partnerships take on a number of different forms. Everything from consortiums, joint ventures, M&As, the regular prime-sub relationships. So we look almost specifically by the country on the gap analysis that we can provide to create a win-win solution, a win for the customer, a win for the company, and obviously a win for our shareholders. So that's really the approach that we've taken, and we're seeing success in that. We're 37% international in 2015. 45% of our backlog is now international, and again, we've experienced similar growth rates of 3 to 5% over the last several years internationally. And again, that's helped us develop additional funds for additional investments that we're turning back into real opportunities.
I think you've made an important point about your country analysis, that every country is unique with its own goals, its own desires, its own notions of sovereignty, and its own aspirations, many of which we've heard here in the UAE. How do you get feedback on the approach that you're contemplating? I mean, does that come directly from the country officials? Does it come from people that you've had who have lived there for a long time?
It's really it's multifaceted, and again, similar to our peers here on the stage. We have folks that are forward deployed, both expats as well as nationals. Our objective is to understand what the customers' needs and desires are, and it's a 360 because we have to be at least 3 of us up here are U.S. customers, so we have a U.S. based. So we have our own bilateral relationships that we have to work through from a U.S. government disclosure process, as well as understanding what we can release to our international customers, as well as what we can co-develop and co-produce locally. So it takes a 360 look, and it takes time, and it takes persistence.
Yeah. And so all that is a good lead-in to you, Thibault, because you are here on the ground. You've been here for 5 years. You've had a chance to experience some of the kind of contacts that we're talking about. How would you characterize a successful dynamic between a country director and the Home Office?
Thanks very much, David, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to be part of the panelists and to share a bit of my local experience. I think, first of all, Thales is very internationally driven. We've got a lot of international operations all over the world, and as been said, every country is unique. UAE is even more unique than the others because we're in a country that in 40 years has been able to develop a massive footprint, has been able to develop a massive industrial operations, and so we've been able and we've been in a position to adapt ourselves into that. And of course, the overall business model of a company like Thales and a company like yours has been adapting into that to move to a kind of international footprint up to a global and driving up to a local footprint. And as a matter of fact, people like me, our roles has been evaluating. If I've got to see the role of my distinguished predecessors a few years or a few decades ago, they were a bit more kind of a delegate, operating, making the go-between between the GHQ, the headquarters, back in Europe, back in the US, trying to understand the culture, trying to do this kind of things. And of course, our role now has been changing. Our role has been moving to this kind of understanding the cultures. I would say for that there are very good books. There is a very good book called Don't They Know It's Friday, which is a very good book on cross-cultural identification between Western and the Middle East. And I think we can do a bit more than just repeating a book. And I'm saying that now our role is being the manager of the local operations, the manager of our branches, the manager of our partnership, because what's quite important is to be a local operator, but in a country like UAE, being a local operator mean being the right partner to the local industry, mean being the right technology transfer, I would say, to the local industry, try to find out and to identify what is really expected by the local industry to better serve, in the end, our common customer being the UAM forces.
Right. So you've begun to address a piece of what the next question was, which was how do you, turning from a customer focus to a developing a partner and a supply chain kind of focus, I'd like to ask our panelists to comment on how do you leverage the strength and innovation in these relationships to best advantage for both parties? Because a partnership isn't a partnership unless both parties feel like they're getting something out of it. How do you manage those relationships? How do you try and develop your supply chain to best effect? Does anyone care to?
Yeah, I'll take that on. Similar to what my colleague said, I think you look at that on a country-by-country basis and look at the needs of the country as a part of your country plan. We're quite a bit smaller than these folks, so we know when we go into these countries, we can't do it all ourselves. We've got to find the right partners, and I think we've probably all learned that selecting the right partners is one of maybe the most important ingredients to success in penetrating the country. We partner with each other, but also finding the in-country capability is absolutely critical. We tend to try to focus on quality and not quantity, having fewer partnerships, trying to find the ones that work most successful is where we have that common win-win scenario between what we're trying to do and what the local country or the local company is trying to do. Usually it includes some sort of a technology transfer, full life logistics support, which is difficult for us to do in certain areas, and we look to partners to help us provide that value add. And in the end, when you've got a great partnership, it's when both parties are successful in making money and follow-on activities happen from that.
Sure. Anyone else care to comment?
So, Dave, I think there's two aspects of it. One is, the supply chain could be a strategic discriminator, right, from a competitive perspective. So clearly one of the things that we have to think through and invest in. And I think the other thing that's important to understand is the investment required to ensure that your supply chain is strong and of quality, because we're going to be held responsible at the end of the day for delivery of our products and services. We held ourselves to the highest standards, and we held our suppliers to those standards as well. So the investment that we make up front into the strategic supply chain pays dividends in the long run, but it is an investment. And I often think that that gets undervalued in the selection processes sometimes, and it gets undervalued, I think, at our U.S. customer basis of what it takes to develop international supply chain with the quality and consistency that we need to deliver products both within the United States as well as our international customers.
Okay.
What I would like to add is what's quite important is that the compatibility of what we want to do locally with the overall group industrial footprint or the overall group industrial strategy. Just to give you a few examples, of course, what we want to do is to work when it comes to maintenance and so on, which is important. But this is not the end of it. What we've got to do, what we want to do is that when we speak about co-development, co-production, co-integration, is that to what extent we may be in a position, together with our local partner, to resell it back, and to bring it back into our world portfolio, our world catalog. And that's really what's quite important, what's the most important. That's why, which is also making a link with the previous question, is that within our local role, is to make sure and to convince internally that what we want to do locally is fully compatible with the overall industrial footprint and the overall industrial strategy that the group is having.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just summarize much of what they said. So when you find a win-win with a partner in your global supply chain, they stay with you forever. And when I ran Hellfire in the 1990s, we actually had a supplier that we put on the UK Apache program that still supplies the Hellfire today. And the offset is 15 years gone, but you found a supplier. We're building, a C-130 empennage in India with no offset obligation associated with it. They're the only supplier of that piece part. I mean, when you identify your market, and in the case of, as an example, you know, our Amrock joint venture is a joint venture, and we're going to do a regional set of business because it's the right thing for the business, and I think that's a success.
So we've talked about aspiration, we've talked about the goal setting and the collaboration that's required to make a successful partnership. Can we talk a little bit about what are some of the obstacles? You know, what are some of the things that have caused maybe, you know, difficulties? Is it technology transfer? Is it government processes? You know, are there things that get in the way of the success you would like to achieve internationally?
Well, there are a lot of regulations and processes that we have to go through. But you know, I think everybody's dealing with those in a consistent manner. I think the real secret is being able to have collaboration between our deployed teams in the field and the folks, what I'll call in the back office or back at the home base. When those teams are working in an integrated way, and we spend a lot of effort using new collaboration tools so that those people are talking on a regular basis, doing things like getting requirements from the international marketplace early in our product development or service development cycle, so that when we do bring those products to market, they have the capabilities that the end market needs, and that really just takes a lot of collaboration. I think where we see teams working really closely together, we have much more success than teams that aren't working together.
Good. I have a lot of questions that I have prepared, but I think we've probably come to a point where we might open it up and see if anyone in the audience has any questions that they'd like to ask the panel, and if not, I'm prepared to drive on. So any questions from the audience? Right here, gentlemen? Yes, sir.
My name is Dr. Fahad Al-Damer, and I really been a product, and I'm trying to do as a local strategic partner for defense security companies in Saudi Arabia. And I find it is the best way is a partnership, especially dealing with the clients and presence. But the difficulty we face is when we have representative from the company come in, and then something happened with the mother company, and discontinue this phase of the transfer the representative. It make discontinuity with the clients, and if there is a little kind of preparation and helping the local partner is to be creating a local capability, not just opening door, just local capability, and this with the time will build loyalty with the mother company as a business win-to-win. What do you think? I'm asking a guy from Lockheed, because it's a giant and big company, and what do you think? What do you doing to build local capability with a local partner? I mean, adding, giving them, the normal training you have for your salespeople, some sort of, transfer of capabilities. That will help even in the competitive arena for future opportunity, rather than just I want you open doors, find the opportunity, when we'll close the deal and all those things. Can you, just elaborate on this, or anybody in the panel?
Well, I'll start. Thank you, Dr. Fahd. Appreciate the question. Obviously, step one is that the business is coming. That's important. And in Saudi in particular, there's much business coming for many companies, not just Lockheed Martin. I would say that maybe you're experiencing just the beginning of the relationship, because we do have many long-standing relationships. I'll be a supplier, consultant, partner, and I think that in general, you know, this is a very positive relationship that we put in place. I mean, Lockheed Martin, essentially much like the other teams here, we almost overwhelmingly go to market first through a partnership, either with an industrial entity or you know, a consultancy of some kind. As far as the tech transfer, which I think what your question was getting at, you know, we're bound to some degree depending on the source of that technology. You're not looking for tech transfer. Yeah, I think that our the root of the question is, will we transition something in advance of basic business? And I think, you know, that's a business decision that any company in any country would take on board. Sometimes the market does, I'll say, look fertile for an advanced investment, and sometimes it's certainly going to be smaller before the business comes until the business comes. I don't know if anybody has a different answer, but I feel pretty good, quite frankly, about the things we're doing in Saudi in particular with the Taqniya joint venture that we're standing up building satellites. We just signed an agreement to actually do Black Hawk co-production with the Sikorsky acquisition. We work very much with AEC and Al Salam already. I mean, I think it's actually a very rich relationship in Saudi, and I do believe in the future when the THAAD sale hopefully gets signed and we do some work with your Navy, that the whole relationship will be much broader and much deeper.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that's why we tend to not try to do a one and done relationship. Those are usually not as productive. If we can have a long-standing with current business ongoing, we've got relationships with AEC that have spanned multiple years, and that'll set us up for follow-on opportunities as well. So I think to the point we've been making is looking at this for the long term a little bit more strategically is the way to go. And we're all looking for the contract mechanism to allow us to sometimes enact that, but the more we have for continued business, the more successful we'll be together.
So I'll add a perspective on Saudi. So Raytheon's been in Saudi 50 years this year. My last visit there, I got the pleasure of awarding a 45-year pin to one of our Saudi national employees. So, you know, I think, so that's a long-term commitment. You know, we've been there. And we've been doing business there not only with the Saudi MOD, but also with Saudi businesses. And I think, you know, we tend to start slow and then go long. That's kind of been the business model that we've been in. So I'd ask for your perseverance as you continue to work with us, because we have to get the right agreements in place. We have to get the right disclosures in place with regard to tech transfer, even if we're doing co-production, which we do a lot of in country. So I think once you kind of get through the near term, the long term is usually good.
Just for me, I had one point. I mean, I'm not going to speak on Saudi, but on your question, I'm hearing one thing, which is somehow kind of a disconnection between the past of the discussions that you may have with the local team compared to what's happening when it's reached the corporate people. I think you're right. I mean, in the end, we're all aiming at a strategic partnership with a local partner and so on and so forth, which is the target that we're having in mind. The point is how we can achieve that. And what's quite important, what usually we try to see with our local partner, that what are the quick wins we can enter into, what are the immediate targets we can chase together in order to convince the people back at corporate that the partnership is a solid one, that we can move to the next step. And that's why it's quite important to have a clear roadmap from these quick wins up to the strategic layers in order to make sure that everybody will be fully lined up on the path of the discussion.
So great question. Thank you for that. Gentleman in the back. In the center, 3/4 of the way back.
Thank you. Wes Cabell with Harris Corporation. As you affect these transitions from international to global, you talked a lot about what you do here in the region corporately to be more successful. What are you also doing with the team back home? The people back who are supporting the people here in the region You all know the book, Don't They Know It's Friday? How do you affect cultural transformation so that your company becomes global, not just businesses that are here doing the work in the region?
It's a great question. Who would like to address it?
I'll take a crack. First of all, obviously you understand the question, so you probably already understand the answer. It's extremely hard. You know, when it's funny, people talk about making sure you understand the culture, you know, in a country that you want to do business in, and the fact of the matter is, at least from my experience, American businesses have a tremendously strong culture as well. And they care more about a job in a particular congressman's district maybe than putting a job in Abu Dhabi or a job in Germany or anywhere else. You know, there's no easy answer. I would tell you what we tried to do with Element International, and I suspect it's similar to the other industrial folks up here, is that you make it somebody's day job to care about the international and to care about the market and in particular the country one by one. Here in UAE, we have Admiral Bob Harward. It's his day job to make sure that the entire corporation does what the United Arab Emirates needs most from that company. And that's different than if you're sitting in Marietta, Georgia, or you're sitting in Grand Prairie, Texas. So there's that natural tension. So that's kind of our story. I don't declare success. Probably will never declare success. But that's the tension that goes on.
I'm gonna pile on with Pat. I view my job as being the cultural sensitizer within the Raytheon company. So I'm the advocate to ensure that we are culturally aware. And we actually have folks in our organization, both with my HR partners as well as embedded in our businesses, that help me do that. And we too have our ambassadors here on the ground that are in 17 different countries right now. But we do need a strong voice back in our Fortress US to ensure that we carry back the voice of the customer, and that's what I consider my responsibility.
Yeah, you know, something we've done that's really helped us is that when we cadence or have business reviews, we do it with the line of business folks, but also with the international people, and we do it at the same time. And so we have an international business review as well as a line of business review. Same people are in the review, so if there's any kind of misalignment, we can get that corrected and make sure the goals and objectives are aligned. You know, generally the line of business and the international have the same goals, but sometimes they're not always aligned, and when they're not, that's what creates this difficulty. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure the goals and objectives are through the line of business, but also through the international organization, and cadence against that.
I'm quite in line with what you said, Kelly, which is kind of how we can make the matrix working together. While on the country side, it's quite important to have representative, as you rightly said, on the business side, and vice versa. On the right, cross objectives, shared objectives, and that's probably the best way to handle that organization.
So Wes is from Harris, and Wes reminded me that my former company, Excelis, was bought by Harris in part to extend some of its global reach. We were in some places you may not have been. You were in some places we may not have been, and so a consolidation happened. But ours is not the only one. Eric was purchased about 2 years ago by Rockwell Collins. Sikorsky has been purchased by Lockheed Martin. WebSense has been purchased by Raytheon. Cybersecurity business. And Thales has bought many, many things. And so there's a little bit of a theme there, both about consolidation, but also about extending reach. And so I'd just like to ask any of the panel members to comment on how these acquisitions help extend reach of companies.
So I got a little bit of story that goes behind ours. So over the last 15 years, not unlike my colleagues here, our company's been under cyber attacks. Right? So back when this first started happening, we had to defend ourselves. Right? We had to protect our IP. We had to protect our customers. So we developed cybersecurity, really focused on how do we protect ourselves. We found out that as we got better at it, that our actually customers wanted some of this protection as well. And because of the evolving threat, you know, we're constantly looking for how do we adapt to the evolving threat. So you do gap analysis and you either develop it or you buy it, right? So over the last 10 years, we've acquired about 12 cyber companies now, with most recently, last year, a major acquisition through a joint venture with an equity partner in a commercial cyber company. So you say, okay, you're a defense company. Why go into the commercial cyber business? Two reasons. One, they've got a great platform, and now we're able to share technologies that we've developed in the defense sector for a commercial market, which now has 22,000 market channels for us. And vice versa, we've got a commercial platform with applications in the defense sector. So it became a aha moment for us to now be diverse, not only in the defense security area for cyber technology, but have a very significant commercial market.
Others like to comment?
So the Sikorsky story is actually, it's kind of interesting, and it's unique because it wasn't a publicly traded company. I mean, it's not an aha moment that Lockheed Martin looked at Sikorsky 16 years ago. In fact, when I was working for the former Electronic Systems, we were trying to figure out what piece, if it ever came on the market of any company, would really be something that fit the portfolio, and Sikorsky was one of them at the time. And obviously, it was just opportunistic that UTC wanted to sell it, starting last year about this time. But interestingly enough, we talk about the global portfolio. So just with the purchase of Sikorsky, we're in 11 or so new countries that we never were before. And so, it's actually, that was certainly not part of the underlying fundamental to get into South America and get into parts of Africa where the Lockheed Martin portfolio didn't exist. But it actually was a really nice addition. And I was talking to some of the folks earlier. I mean, so I think Lockheed Martin has the ability, we talk about a phrase called the better owner. Well, I think it's clear, and it was certainly clear to us, I think it's clear to the Sikorsky guys, that Lockheed Martin was a much better owner of Sikorsky than the UTC Corporation, based on all of the things we do as a prime platform manufacturer, working with the U.S. government, but also selling internationally. So it's been a really, so far, a tremendous success story.
And Kelly, you want to comment on Eric?
Well, maybe a broader comment than just Eric. I think having the international focus in a country by country plan allows you to look at M&A not just for building a product or a capability set, but also looking at the channel and what you need in the particular channel. So now, when we're cadencing and taking a look at M&A opportunities, that is one of the criteria we're looking at. And doing an acquisition like Eric is very similar. It brought us a much more diverse customer base, a much more diverse employee base in the international market. And once you do that, you can go leverage that across your other product lines and enhance your sales and create the synergies that make the M&A world work.
I'll come back to workforce in just a second, but let me just ask if there's a question. Yes, sir.
Hi, Leandro Dessa from Global Air Partners. Question, maybe in two steps, two aspects I'd like to hear you comment on. One is global financial / risk hedging, and not just in the sense of acquisitions, also in the sense of investment, non-recurring costs, and so on. Enhance international for that. And then the second one would be the quest for talent, and namely in areas where we know that the U.S. has been not so prolific in developing talent, as demand doesn't correspond to supply. So can you comment on those two aspects for internationalization?
Would anyone like to pick up that one?
I'll tackle the talent one. I might defer the international hedging on financials. Any CFOs in the audience? So, talent is a significant challenge, I think, for all of us. So what are we doing about it? Well, we do a significant investment in science, technology, engineering, and math globally. Very clearly in the U.S., very targeted at not college kids, but middle school children, and as they progress through high school, we're trying to track those students that we reach out to all the way through to encourage them to get into technical educations and all the way through graduate school. Similarly, we're doing very similar approaches internationally. Just last week, for example, with Khalifa University, we had a cybersecurity forum where we had Khalifa participate in workshops, and so we're trying to encourage students here in the UAE to get into electrical engineering degrees and computer science degrees, because we see the need for these folks as they enter the workforce to be trained in those areas to essentially not only sustain us where we are today, but to grow our capabilities in the international workforce. So we're on a very significant outreach to develop talent worldwide.
Just if I may add one thing on the talent, I mean, Thales, we've been establishing some companies here in partnership with CERT Institute, which is a local university back in 1999. And what we've been doing is that with and thanks to such a structure, is working, developing local talent, being a question why not to hire them back some in our companies. But that's not the only thing. I mean, what's quite important as well is the relationship with the universities. What kind of partnership you can put with the universities. And in this part of the world, especially in the UAE, you've got a lot of universities, very attractive, that can give the right number of talents, and where we can develop some kind of training program, internship program. And of course, the aim is not only to bring back this local talent to our local operations, but also, and most importantly, to bring this local talent into our world operations back in the rest of our corporate structures.
And I'm going to take the question about finance or hedging in maybe a slightly different direction, just to ask, when you have businesses internationally and you're trapping cash internationally, has that caused any of your companies to take a different look at international opportunities for acquisition, more so than you might have done in the past? I mean, is that a part of your strategy now, or no?
I would say that it's driving the strategy, but it is a component. If we've got trapped cash somewhere and we can utilize that through M&A, that is a strategic component, a strategic lever that's available to us.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that it hasn't been a key component of the strategy, pro or con. We've actually made acquisitions in the UK and in Europe, and obviously we've set up joint ventures through Asia, India, and here in the Middle East. And quite frankly, we typically have the sort of reserves, and big acquisitions might drive a different answer, but the types of investments that we've made, our cash strategy has been basically supportive of that.
Okay.
I think similarly, we look at really the strategic opportunity, and we're not being driven because we have cash offshore. So it's really, does it make sense? Does it fill a gap? Does it create a win-win solution?
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience? Steve.
How has Steve Herring, James Capital Partners, how has the price of oil affected your respective demand forecasts? And how do you see it affecting the regional distribution of that going forward?
Well, the answer is it's not clear yet. I think it's still working its way through the end market demands. We service the air transport market, the defense business, and business aviation, and probably we've seen the negative impact in business aviation, oil and gas exploration, rotary wing platforms for oil and gas have certainly seen a negative impact. Obviously the airlines are doing much better with low fuel prices. I don't think I've seen where that's turned into massive expenditures from the airlines, but as they go through their budgeting process, more discretionary things that maybe they couldn't afford before are on the table going forward. So I think it's still kind of too early to tell how that's going to impact us in the long run.
I mean, I would make two comments, and Kelly already kind of articulated. The Sikorsky acquisition brought with it the helicopter S-92 that was purpose-built to sell to oil and gas exploration companies. Obviously, that's under a lot of pressure because their budgets are under pressure. But the other answer I'd give, because I mean, you'd naturally think that countries that were oil and gas generated from their revenues, that maybe there'd be a slacking. The bottom line is the countries that have bought military and security systems and projects have always been, you know, there hasn't been like a fire sale, you know, when they have lots of money and tight when they maybe don't. The bottom line is security products are security products. They get scrutinized because the country needs them. And I've never seen at a time when it was easy to sell security projects, and I don't think we're at a time where it's necessarily hard now. It's driven by a country's national need.
And I have to agree that when you look around, global insecurity is driving, you know, the procurement of products that we sell. And I think countries are balancing their security needs against their revenues that are generated, if it's an oil, you know, petrochemical basis for their national economies. But it's clear that the security needs aren't going away. Actually, there's a demand signal out there for increased capability. Countries that are putting their troops, their men and women that are in uniform in harm's way, they want them to come home safe, and they're investing to ensure that they can go out, accomplish their mission, and come home safe.
I think on that, of course, the oil price is definitely having an impact on our forecast, and we've got to be extremely careful in the way we are assessing that and preparing the workload and the forecast. And if I may make the link with the previous question, which was as regards to financing, and of course, we've got to be somehow more innovative when it comes to the civilian domain and to the civilian businesses. And more, we've got to, we are required to bring some financing packages and some project finance oriented scheme. And these kind of things as well that we are looking at and that we're focusing in order to further develop and to make the forecast becoming a reality at the end of the year.
So I'm afraid we've come to the end of our time, but I want to thank each one of our panel members for their contributions today and each one of you for your questions. I would just say you've heard from 4 great global companies. And the fact that they're here and the fact that they want to be here is really a great demonstration of the partnership that each of them has with the United Arab Emirates. And we really appreciate the participation in the hosting of Mubadala and others to allow this to happen. So thank you all.